Congratulations to GB News Breakfast, voted by you as the nation's best multi-channel news program at the prestigious Trick Awards.
Hello there, it is Friday. Welcome, I'm Michelle Dewberry, right through till 7 o'clock tonight. A few questions for you to ponder. When it comes to asylum processing units, do you think they should be welcome centres or law enforcement centres? That is a row that's been brewing today, and it all centres around the fact that there were things like Mickey Mouse cartoons painted onto the walls of a unit that was specifically designed for children. Now they have been painted over as order, so that people actually don't feel too welcome. By people, I mean children, and instead they get the message that it's all about law enforcement. What do you make to this? Is this a sensible move, or it is a little bit ridiculous? Your thoughts, please. And can you believe it's the anniversary of Boris Johnson's resignation? Time flies, doesn't it? So my question for you tonight is simple. Is UK politics a better place without him in that role, or not? And the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, says that universities should have their funding cut if students, among other things, feel insulted. But this is quite a strange thing, because who gets to quantify what is insult? I mean, I might say something to you and I might not mean it that way. You could take it that way. Who gets to decide what is what? And should funding be linked to that, yes or no? And in much of the UK, we have one of the highest levels when it comes to drink driving rates. Some are saying now that this limit should be reduced, perhaps to even zero. So yeah, zero tolerance. You cannot even have a single drink before you drive. Is that common sense, or is it nanny state gone mad? We've got it all coming up and more, but before we get into it, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
I'm Ray Addison with the latest news from the GB newsroom. The gunman who killed a beautician outside a pub in Merseyside on Christmas Eve has been sentenced to life and will serve a minimum of 48 years for her murder. 26-year-old Ellie Edwards was killed by Connor Chapman outside the Lighthouse pub in the Wirral last year. The 23-year-old fired 12 shots from a submachine gun, injuring several others before fleeing the scene. Chapman was found guilty after a 3.5-week trial at Liverpool Crown Court. Ellie's father, Tim Edwards, spoke after the sentencing.
Thankfully now he's got 48 years and hopefully he never sees Christmas again. If I'm lucky enough to still be around for a long time, yeah, I would do my best to make sure he never comes out of jail.
A man who killed a mother and her 2 young daughters by setting fire to their flat in Nottingham has been jailed for life and will serve a minimum term of 44 years. 31-year-old Jamie Barrow was found guilty of murdering his neighbour, Fatoumata Hydrara, and her daughters Fatima and Naima in Clifton last year. The court heard that he poured petrol through their letterbox before setting it alight and watching the fire take hold. An 8-year-old girl and a 40-year-old woman remain in a life-threatening condition in hospital following yesterday's crash at a school in Wimbledon. Another 8-year-old girl was killed after a Land Rover crashed through a fence and into the study prep school. The driver, a 46-year-old woman arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving, has now been bailed pending further inquiries. A coroner has concluded that the deaths of 4 boys who drowned after falling into a frozen lake near Solihull was a terrible accident. Brothers 6-year-old Samuel and 8-year-old Finley Butler died, along with their 11-year-old cousin Thomas Stewart and 10-year-old Jack Johnson. The court heard that the children went to Babs Mill Lake in Kingshurst in December last year to skim stones and feed the ducks. Police formed a human chain to punch through the ice and pull the children out of the lake, but all 4 later died. Superintendent Richard Harris says his officers did everything they could to save them.
My own local officers were the first to arrive on the scene within minutes of the initial call and tried so desperately to rescue the boys that afternoon, with many wading into sub-zero water up to their necks to form a human chain. They had no specialist equipment but bravely smashed their way through the ice with their batons and fists in a bid to find the boys.
The government has doubled down on its refusal to commit to accepting teachers' pay review proposals.
Education is a right, that is why we have to fight.
It comes after members of the National Education Union took part in a second day of industrial action this week. They were warning there could be more strikes in the autumn term. All four education unions rejected the government's offer of a one-off payment and a 4.5% pay rise next year. A science teacher on that picket line told us he'd like a rise in line with inflation.
We feel that our pay has been cut significantly as a result of stagnating wages for education and rising inflation, and we feel that this government hasn't been willing to do enough to support education. And we know that so many new teachers are leaving the profession so early. It's unsustainable. The wages are not meeting the work that they're being asked to put in, and it's driving people out of the system, and that's really bad for students.
More than 300 people were intercepted in small boats in the English Channel in the early hours of this morning. It's the first crossings in 7 days following poor weather. GBNews understands that the boats pushed off from a 60-mile stretch of the French coastline from Dunkirk to Boulogne. It brings the total number of crossings so far this year to over 11,700. And former Manchester United and Netherlands goalkeeper Edwin van der Sar is in intensive care after suffering bleeding around his brain. The news was announced on social media by his former club Ajax, who said he's in a stable condition. The 52-year-old was admitted to hospital after suffering a cerebral hemorrhage while in Croatia. It comes after he announced that he'd be stepping down from the Ajax board, saying he needed to get some rest. Manchester United tweeted saying they were sending all their love and strength. We're on TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too. This is GB News. Back now to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Ray. I am Michelle Dewberry with you right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, a new face. We like those, don't we? Communications Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim, and the author, broadcaster and firefighter with a new haircut, Paul Embry. Welcome. And welcome, we do like a new face. A think tank. For my viewers at home that are not familiar, you hear this word bandied around all the time. What is a think tank?
A think tank, so effectively, we at the Institute of Economic Affairs are an educational charity. We try and talk about the ideas of a free society and try and get enough people to listen.
So, you just get paid for a penny for your thoughts in a think tank. There you go.
Translated, right-wing libertarians, no role for the state, everything handed over to the market. That's right, really, isn't it?
I am a libertarian, yes, that is true. I don't necessarily like the word right-wing. I think it's kind of quite sort of unuseful. You know, the word right-wing and left-wing, these kind of different dichotomies.
But government's an inherent, you know, evil, and there's no place for it other than perhaps in the most essential areas.
It is. Have you seen the current government?
No room for intervention in the economy, rolling back the frontiers of the state, letting market forces dominate.
So I think you're confusing...
That's what it is. Come on.
I think you're confusing what sort of broad libertarianism is and anarchy. I'm not an anarchist. I don't believe in the total abolition of the state.
No, you're not.
I do believe that the government has the propensity to do more harm than good. I think our viewers will also agree, the way that the government have been handling every crisis over the past decade or so, the government tend to do more bad things.
You think we should privatise the National Health Service, then?
Of course I do.
Do you think we should privatise the police, then? And if not, why not? Why the inconsistency for an essential service?
Not quite inconsistency. So I do believe that the police service, again, it needs to be a monopoly on the state. The NHS is a monopoly on healthcare. When we look across the world, we can look at other countries that have much better healthcare systems. This week, we celebrated the 75th anniversary of the NHS.
Yeah, I'll tell you what else was the anniversary of. Boris Johnson and him resigning. I'll be getting into that a little bit more into the programme. But there you go. That's a flavour of what we've got coming up. You know the drill as well, don't you? It's not just about us three. It's very much about you guys at home. Get in touch. GBviews at gbnews.com is the email, or you can tweet me at GBnews. I had a brainwave today. I did have to go for a lie down for a minute afterwards, I do confess. But I thought to myself, you know what? Wouldn't it be nice to bring you guys actually into this programme? So I'm going to start reaching out. If there's ever any viewers out there, you want to get your, I'm sure, beautiful face and voice onto Dewbs & Co, do get in touch with me on the email, because I do want to start adding your voice into the conversation. You can join us, listen in, and tell these guys what you actually think of what we are discussing. So pop your thoughts, your names, your suggestions into that inbox, and we'll, hopefully get in touch with some of you. But our top story tonight, this is a very peculiar one, I have to say, and I'm fascinated to know your thoughts on it, because the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, he has come under fire. The reason being because there's an asylum processing centre in Kent, right? And I need to make something very clear. This is an asylum processing centre for children, so unaccompanied children. It's not just a random adult one. It's specifically designed for children. And as such, it had some kind of paintings on the wall, like, I don't know, like Mickey Mouse, whatever, like children's paintings. In fact, I've got a picture that I can show you now. The reason it's all kind of kicked off, and I will put this picture up to give you some context to what we're talking about, is because these pictures you can see, like Mickey Mouse, Tom and Jerry, whatever, the government has now ordered these to be painted over, because what they're saying is asylum centres should be a law enforcement centre, not a welcome centre. And he wants to have almost kind of a mentality, Reem, which is dissuading people, discouraging people to make that crossing. He has come under a lot of criticism, though, because painting over cartoons is, for some people, a stretch too far. Your thoughts?
This is an absolutely ridiculous thing to do. I mean, they've totally missed the ball here. What the people want, what the public want, is a reduction in the illegal migrants that are coming to this country. They don't want a waste of taxpayer money being spent on covering up children's paintings. That is ridiculous. It feels incredibly callous and cruel in the first instance. And I think that actually the framing of this question is quite interesting. This idea that for somehow, if we have these paintings, it makes that immigrants want to come here more. It makes asylum seekers, children want to come here more often. That's just not the case at all. I think it's quite a cruel policy.
Yeah, but I guess, well, actually, you tell me your thoughts. I'll tell you mine. Go on.
Well, I think it's stupid, and I think it's callous, and I think most people out there, even though they believe in strong borders, even though they think the system is broken, even though they think the government should do much better at reducing numbers and stopping the small boats, would look at something like this and say, but I don't support this, because this is effectively taking it out on kids, and I don't know a single voter who would support that. And if the government think that actually this is some kind of substitute for having a proper and effective asylum policy, and that voters are going to be convinced about silly gimmicks like this, then, frankly, I don't think they understand the general public. The public doesn't want cruelty. The public doesn't want callousness when it comes to asylum and immigration. They want a fair system. They want people to be treated humanely. They just want the system managed properly. They want it regulated properly. They want the numbers to be modest and manageable. And personally, I think the painting should be redone.
There's a big collection of artists now that have offered their time and their kind of materials free of charge, I think, to repaint them. You know, we hear this phrase about a hostile environment for people wanting to illegally enter the country and all the rest of it. And many people would say, well, actually, yeah, that is right. We should be creating an environment that is hostile. So if you're considering coming into the country in this way, you know, we're going to do everything possible to make it as uncomfortable as possible so that you decide not to do it, perhaps. Why would people like that?
Why would we want to make this country uncomfortable for children? I mean, that is just, I think, an entirely absurd argument. First of all, these children didn't come here off their own volition. They've probably come here with other adults that have either smuggled them here illegally, or they've been able to come here illegally themselves with other of these kind of gangs that bring them over. They are criminals, and these children are incredibly vulnerable. I understand the argument when it comes to the way that we're spending taxpayer money when it comes to these asylum centres, when it comes to bringing these individuals into hotels, but this is effectively a waste of taxpayer money, painting over murals.
And let's be blunt, it calls into question the judgment of the government, because somebody somewhere, whether it's Jenrick in the Cabinet or someone in the Home Office, came up with the idea that this was a wise and sensible thing to do, and probably thought that it was a popular thing to do because, you know, the public are going to fall for this. They're going to think, you know, we're really tough on asylum seekers. And to be honest, if we've got people like that running the country who are so out of touch on issues like this that they think that using kids as pawns in a political argument over asylum and immigration is going to win popularity,
then
that itself concerns
So let me play devil's advocate, because there is this whole industry that's been spawned now, which is where things like TikTok are getting used as a glorified travel brochure. So people are kind of putting all this kind of literature on there to entice other people to spend their dollar on crossing this channel. So, and I am, you know, I am trying to play devil's advocate here, just so you know. But so then if you imagine then, so you've got these kids, teenagers, whatever it is, in this centre with their smartphones, filming around. Oh, yeah, look, you've got Mickey Mouse, you've got Tom and Jerry, There might be an opportunity to crop that up, misrepresent it, and bang, there's your family section on your TikTok travel brochure.
I don't think it's going to be teenagers who are selling the idea of Baloo, the bear from the Jungle Book, and Mickey Mouse. I mean, these murals are clearly aimed at very young children. And these are children who, as Reem said, have had absolutely no choice in what's happened to them. It must be a very unpleasant experience to have come from their home that they're used to, and they've travelled to another country and they've been put in this centre. And you know, one of the small mercies of trying to make it a little bit welcoming and a little bit child-friendly by having murals on the wall from the Jungle Book and cartoons and stuff, and then a workman comes in on the instruction of the Home Office and paints over them. I mean, I just think it's ridiculously callous and deeply uncharitable, and how anyone could have thought it was a good decision it beggars belief.
Yeah, I've got to say, not a lot of people are agreeing with what the government has done here. Roman says, utterly stupid. Has this government ever been on the right side of anything? Why would they do this to children? I mean, this is kind of a line, isn't it? So a lot of people will, of course, you know, you will push back and you'll say, you know, these people shouldn't be getting on these, you know, dinghies or whatever. But there is something odd, Andy says, for you to paint over cartoons and children's eyes one of the most nasty and pathetic stories I've heard in a very long time. Shame on all of those that sanctioned it. Martin says, well, no, I actually agree with it. It's not a holiday camp. Keep them uncomfortable until they decide to leave.
Keep the kids uncomfortable?
But Martin, I mean, yeah, I was just about to say, I do have to push back on this a little bit because, you know, this is, and I do need to make this absolutely clear, this is exclusively a child migrant processing centre. It's not a mixed one or anything like that. And yes, I know some of you will write back and say, but Michelle, many of the people coming in that say that their children are actually not, and I can feel that sentiment coming through. But to be fair, those Mickey Mouse things, they're probably not targeting the 15, 16, 17-year-old people that would tick the box for, are they? It's the little kids. So you imagine, I don't know, if someone's shoved their 5-year-old on this boat with another random adult and said, do me a favour, please, please, please make sure that they get to the UK safe. And then now you've got this little 5-year-old kid. You know, I mean, can you imagine? I mean, I get goosebumps because I am a mum, but, you know, imagine just a little child on, and I don't have sympathy for a grown man pretending that the kids, by the way, so I'm not going soft in my old age, but if you've got a genuine child, you know, you wouldn't want them to be uncomfortable. That situation must be absolutely terrifying.
And you don't play politics with kids' lives. You know, you can have robust disagreements on immigration, but you don't play politics with kids.
Do you know something else as well? Because this has not gone well for this government, I have to say. And it always makes me think, I don't know who's advising these governments, because if you did want to paint over the mural and that was your idea and it was your dream, wouldn't you just paint over the whole room and just say you actually was refreshing the room and you wouldn't have had any of this stick in the first place? I don't know. You tell me your thoughts. I'm sure you will. Lots coming your way. Boris Johnson, drink drive limits, university funding and a lot more. See you in 2.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A sunny and hot weekend at first for some, before the inevitable thundery breakdown and much fresher conditions arrive from the Atlantic. We've got a couple of areas of low pressure spinning out to the west of the UK. They're helping to draw up this increased heat and humidity before they send some weather fronts in, and we see this thundery breakdown later Saturday and into Sunday. But before that happens, a clear and dry night for many. We will see the cloud thicken across Wales and the southwest, and some showers will push into Devon and Cornwall by dawn. But it's a muggy night wherever you are, 17, 18, 19 Celsius fairly widely. Even in the north of Scotland, mid-teens are possible. But a fine start for Scotland and for much of England first thing Saturday. Sunny skies, temperatures shooting up, but the showers in the southwest will quickly push into central areas, developing into an intense area of thundery rain by the afternoon, with the risk of localised flooding, large hail and frequent lightning, particularly towards the Midlands into northern England and southern Scotland later. But ahead of that rain, could reach the low 30s in East Anglia. Much fresher conditions arrive by the start of Sunday. Any thundery rain clearing for the north of Scotland, but further spells of wet weather likely to brush past southeast England before some heavy showers and thunderstorms develop across Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest into the afternoon. We keep the showers and some thunderstorms into the start of next week, but it also turns cooler.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you right through until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, we have a new face, the Communications Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim, and the author, broadcaster and firefighter, Paul Embry. I was asking you guys to get in touch as well if you fancy yourself as a bit of a face to go on the television, you sharing your views with the nation. Lots of you are getting in touch as well. Charles puts himself forward, he says, as a financial and personal finance issue guru. Well, it's up to you. You can get in touch question. Give me your specialist subject, or you can just be an all-rounder that's got forthright opinions. Whatever it is, get in touch with me and let me know if you want to take part in Dewbs and Co. But let's move on. Do you remember this moment a year ago today?
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you. It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. And I've agreed with Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of our backbench MPs, that the process of choosing that new leader should begin now.
Cool, blimey, a lot has gone on, hasn't it, in the year that followed since Sandy. Says Michelle, British politics is not better off without Boris. It's much, much worse. In fact, it is horrendous, she says. Bring back democracy and bring back Boris. Paul, bring him back. That is who we voted for. Cyril says, no, we are worse off without him. I don't know where we're going or where we're heading. We need a snap election, he says, to stop all of this nonsense. Jim, I voted for Boris Johnson, not the Tories. He should never have been pushed out. Well, interestingly enough, Reem, you actually campaigned alongside and for Boris Johnson. You live in his constituency.
I do live in his constituency, Uxbridge and South Ruislip. It's a fantastic, lovely suburb on the side of London. And I did campaign 2019. I thought that actually, when we looked at the position that we were in, we had Jeremy Corbyn, who is a socialist. He is also an anti-Semite. He is, I believe, what would effectively take the country down a horribly bad path. And then you had Boris Johnson.
He's an anti-Semite, obviously, wouldn't he?
Yes, he
would. If he was sitting here today, carry on.
He would deny that. There are many that do deny that. I think that there are some issues there. Point being, there was a huge, for me, it was a effectively good versus evil kind of election, which is why I did support the Conservatives and did support Boris Johnson at the time.
So Boris Johnson, he played no role in your active campaign. It was more you just didn't want Corbyn.
Yes, exactly. So Boris Johnson himself, I mean, we looked at during his premiership, we had the highest tax burden since the Second World War. We had increasing amounts of immigration. We had the lockdowns, which effectively were ineffective, and we saw just sort of a 3.2% reduction in mortality rates, and yet we saw all of the social costs. We saw children that weren't able to go to school. We saw people being mandated to have the vaccine. So actually, I think that when we're looking at the broader picture here, Boris Johnson was one of the worst prime ministers that we've had in this country. When it came to 2019, he's a fantastic election winner. He's incredibly charismatic. People love him. Even so, the few times
her face has lit up, look.
I mean, well, there you go. The few times I have met him, I've sort of told myself that I'm actually going to tell him what I think about his policies. And then when I went into the room, I was like, "Hi, Boris, you're great."
I chickened out. Paul Embry, British politics, better or worse now that he's not there?
Better that he's not there. I think he was completely unsuited to the job of Prime Minister, a job that has been held by statesmen and stateswomen and should be held by people of that sort of gravitas. I think he was a man who had a casual relationship with the truth. I think he was a man of questionable personal morality. I often wonder how he managed to ascend the poll to the position of Prime Minister. But then you think, actually, it's that old thing, isn't it? He went to Eton, he went to Oxford, he was very well connected. We are an elitist society, social mobility is going backwards, and people like that, regardless of whether they're good, bad or indifferent at their job, tend to get to the top. And it's that whole sense of entitlement, which he had in spades, let's be blunt about it. He obviously thought he was born to be Prime Minister.
He wanted it world king.
I think he wrote.
He did call himself world king.
He wrote when he was a kid that he was going to be world king, and I just think actually it was how long was he Prime Minister for? 3 years or whatever it was, and it was just a wasted period in many respects. I think he craved power, but actually when he got power, didn't quite know what to do with it, and the whole thing was a bit of a damp squib.
Yeah,
I think the other thing, by the way, is his politics were very much opposed to the politics of the people who put him there. He is, let's be blunt, a social and economic liberal, whereas the people who actually voted for him, you know, largely the people who voted for Brexit, and got the Tories the massive mandate in the 2019 election, some of these red wall constituencies, they are not social and economic liberals. And so what he was doing was playing to an electorate who had diametrically opposed opinions to his own instinctive opinions, actually.
So
I think it was an experiment of 3 years of celebrity government, and I think it failed.
Okay, I wouldn't say celebrity government. What I will say, and I'm not going to sit here and defend Johnson for numerous of his issues, again, with the tax burden, etc. What I will say is Johnson did get Brexit done. He did listen to the public, and that is effectively why he was so successful at the election. You've got to say he's probably one of the most successful politicians in the past decade.
And can I also just point out as well, because I do think this is something that gets completely overlooked. You know, if you look at the circumstances that he had to deal with, so you had to mop up the whole Brexit thing, and that was not made easy for a variety of different reasons. And then you had this global pandemic almost kind of 5 minutes after he'd got into office. So he did have to deal with kind of a completely different landscape from the one that he originally inherited. And I think no matter who was the Prime Minister at that time during COVID, nobody was going to come off well. But the problem that you've got is a lot of the people that voted Boris Johnson, and I know some of you will be watching tonight, a lot of these people would never have gone Tory. In a million years, in a month of Sundays, they wouldn't have gone Tory. They went Tory because of Boris Johnson. So that is the first thing. They got their 80-seat majority, I would say, primarily because it was Johnson at the helm. And those people, Paul, let me finish my point, those people, they feel cheated now because they sit there, they're turned out, many of them might not have even have turned out before or couldn't be bothered or disenfranchised or were unrepresented or whatever it is. They turned out, they gave that person their vote. And yes, I know we don't have a presidential system in this country before you tell me how it works, but notwithstanding that, people feel that they voted for Johnson, they didn't vote for Sunak, and they feel disconnected with democracy as a result.
No, I understand that, but I would disagree that the vote in 2019 was explicitly a vote for Boris Johnson. I think the Tories got the messaging right in 2019. I think the whole Get Brexit Done thing, and whatever you think about Dominic Cummings, I think he had a large amount to do with that. Combined, the Get Brexit Done message combined with the levelling up message, which was pitched at those red wall areas who had been let down and felt left behind by Labour, and the impacts of globalisation on their lives and free movement and deindustrialisation and so on. And the Tories made all sorts of promises to those constituencies about getting Brexit done, about ending free movement, about levelling up. All promises, frankly, that have turned to dust. Look at the most recent immigration figures. How many people can genuinely say in those constituencies that we've reindustrialised in any serious way? So it wasn't a vote for Johnson, I don't think.
Well, you tell me, was it?
It was a vote for the Tories.
I bet a lot of people say it was.
Well, when you look at the election and we look at the position that we were in 2019, we saw how often Brexit was spoken about in the news. I was quite frankly sick of it. We know what the people voted for, and it wasn't being implemented. It was being attempted to be implemented by Remain a Prime Minister, which was incredibly ineffective. What you did see in 2019 is Boris Johnson, who is an incredibly charismatic figure. Now, I'm afraid I do think we do agree on Boris Johnson on this particular issue here, but I do think that he is an incredibly effective election winner, and that is why the Conservative Party kept him on for so long. It's also why polling data shows that Boris Johnson is still quite popular.
But what's the point?
I think he is.
But what's the point in, you know, even if we accept for the sake of argument that all of that is true, what is the point of being popular at the ballot box and attaining power and ascending to a particular position if when you get there, actually, you don't do anything with it and, you know, you don't really have a clear programme? It seems that the only reason you've got there in the first place was because of, you know, personal ambition. And as I think we would agree on, you know, he had 3 wasted years.
Oh, I completely agree. We're looking at the tax burden, looking at housing, looking at the NHS, looking at many public services.
There was a global pandemic.
But it's that sense of... And
he told us we had to stay at home.
It's that sense of entitlement, isn't it? It's you know, if you're a Labour person from a working class background, you don't expect to become Prime Minister. If you become Prime Minister, you probably think it's by accident. And to get there, you would have had to have had...
We haven't had one of those Prime Ministers in a while.
You would have had to have had a very clear programme.
Yes, but hold on, because
which you've been arguing with people for years, which is a clearly set out programme. With Boris Johnson,
push back on that point?
Eton and Oxford, I'm going to be the Prime Minister.
Yeah,
that's the ingrained sense of entitlement.
But what's wrong with that? Surely you should want people, wherever you're from, thinking, actually, whatever I want to achieve, I can do it. So why wouldn't you focus more on raising aspiration there rather than knocking the fact that he had that aspiration?
Because well, look, you can't have a system in a meritocracy if you believe in fairness and equality, as we're always told about, and you look at the list of prime ministers this century and you see the proportion of them that have gone to Eton and gone to Oxford.
I don't believe in equality. Equality is effectively socialism, is what you're arguing for.
You see the number of people, really talented people, who could have ascended to that position, but because of social mobility being what it is, never got the chance, then you have to start questioning it.
Well, my message for you, if you've got kids, grandkids, or you yourself, if you sit there thinking, do you know what, I want to be the Prime Minister of this country, you get that ambition, you grab all of that ambition and you make it happen if that is what you want. But be careful what you wish for, is what I would say. Michael says Boris is a flawed genius, but Kent says Boris was a buffoon and he sold out the British people on Brexit and immigration. Mixed opinions coming from you guys at home. Keep your thoughts coming in. I want to talk to you next about university funding and the drink drive limit in this country. Should it be slashed? See you in 2. Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you right through till 7 o'clock tonight on this Friday evening. Alongside me, I have the new face communications officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim, and author, broadcaster and firefighter Paul Embry. One of my viewers, I'll just explain you work at a think tank, one of my viewers has been in touch, we're trying to find your name, John. He says think tanks are the biggest problem in this country. Is that a bit harsh?
I think that is a bit harsh. What we try to do is to try and argue for these ideas and allow people to listen, but if you disagree with us, that's that's totally OK.
Well, there you go. All views welcome on Dewbs & Co. Right, the Archbishop of Canterbury said that universities should have their funding cut if they allow people to be abused, insulted and excluded. Now, I've got to say, some of those things are quite sensible. You know, if I come and punch you in the face because you're talking nonsense, then obviously we would all agree that I have just... Yeah, I have abused you, it's a very clear-cut thing. When you start kind of going down this line of, you know, I might have said, well, what are you doing with your beard back on? Well, you know, da-da-da-da. You might feel insulted and all the rest of it. So firstly, how do you even police this stuff? And secondly, should the funding of unis be attached to it?
Well, you can't police it. I'm a near absolutist, I would say, on free speech. And of course, there's a difference between physically assaulting someone, which of course is unacceptable, and just expressing a particular political or moral view that people happen to disagree with. If you express a political or moral view and it's a sincerely held view, and someone disagrees with that and takes offence at that, then the problem is theirs. The problem is not yours. Now, I'm not suggesting it's a nice thing to do to gratuitously go out and insult somebody. Why would you want to do that? But if someone takes offence because of your position, then the problem is theirs. And I just think, I mean, it's another intervention from Justin Welby on the side of woke, let's be honest. And once upon a time, the Church of England used to be called the Tory party at prayer. It's now the Lib Dems at prayer. That's the brutal truth of it. And universities, actually, should be cauldrons of debate. They should be places where students are exposed to the widest possible range of ideas, even the most controversial ideas, because what that does, first of all, you're better informed, and secondly, you can polish it. It helps you to polish your own arguments. If you think someone's presented an alternative view which is challenging, actually it helps you polish your own arguments in terms of then coming back and setting out your own case. And it worries me that we're kind of breeding a generation of kids who are coming through universities who are going to be leaders of our public services, captains of industry and so on, who think it's acceptable to have one view on contentious issues. That's the mindset, and that's really dangerous.
Absolutely, and I do think that actually that free speech point is really quite important. It should not be illegal to cause offence, and it should not be. You should not have funding withdrawn in this particular instance from the government as a result of causing some kind of offence. Now, the Institute of Economic Affairs actually published a paper recently about the way that we should fund universities, and actually at the moment the way the system works. I did just leave university as well, so
what did you study?
I studied politics and history at the London School of Economics, and effectively those kind of universities do have a lot of a kind of free speech crisis, where a lot of these professors, where they are very, very sort of liberal in the American sense, they tend to be quite sort of Remainer, and they do actually allow and foster that kind of an environment where only one view is particularly allowed. Now, this particular paper published by the IEA spoke about the way that we can actually incentivise students to have that kind of accountability with professors. At the moment, the way the funding works, universities and the government, effectively, you're looking at the money that way. Universities and students themselves have absolutely no financial connection, which means that there is no accountability for students and for professors. Now, if we were to fund these universities very differently, actually what that would mean is that students are able to be accountable to the universities and vice versa. Just like how you would, you know, at Sainsbury's moving along to Asda if you don't like how they've sort of packaged their products. It's how the market works. If we marketise universities, actually it solves a lot of this.
We've actually got far too many universities. In my view, we should close down half of our universities and convert them to vocational colleges or technical colleges. We've got a serious lack of vocational and technical skills in this country.
How many universities have we got?
Well,
I bet you don't even know.
There's been, well, I don't know the exact figure, but there's been an explosion.
Well, how do you know we've got too many then? If you don't know how many we've got?
Because a lot of the old polytechnics became universities. And there was an explosion around the sort of 1980s, 1990s in the number of universities. Blair had this ridiculous idea of forcing 50% of all young people through university. So you've now got this situation where kids are saddled with debt, often, you know, no disrespect to them, but attaining worthless degrees at the end of it that are not actually going to advance them in any serious way in life or in their career. And at the same time, what we've had is, as I said, a complete lack of people with vocational and technical skills to the degree where we're relying on cheap imported labour to plug the shortfall. And that's why we should...
Well, I think part of the problem with that respect is the fact that we've got 5.3 million people on out-of-work benefits not working, and that's why we're having to pull in migrants from across the world in order to fill in that vacancy gap. The real problem is that our benefit system keep those people on benefits and incentivise them to stay reliant on the state rather than getting into work.
Some of those people would say, hang on a minute, she's talking about me, but I can't go to work because I'm ill.
That's fine. There are definitely people that are ill. There are also definitely people on benefits that shouldn't be.
Shut down half the universities, convert them to technical and vocational colleges and bring back tuition fees for the people who do go to university.
There you go. Do you agree with that? 160 universities, apparently. I'd love to say that I knew that off the top of my head, but I don't. Someone just told me, I must confess. But in case you're wondering how many there are, then there you go. That is your answer. Now, let's talk booze, shall we? It's Friday night. Let me ask you a very simple question. In this country, much of the United Kingdom anyway, we have the highest drink drive limit across Europe. Some people now saying that it needs to be slashed, arguing perhaps that zero, absolutely zero alcohol in your system should be the limit before you get in the car. What says you?
On Mark Dolan tonight in my take at 10, the dark forces that would like to close down GB News. I'll be giving my first exclusive thoughts on a vicious industry that wants to deprive you of a voice. In my big opinion, the push for a cashless society is an attack on people power. Cash is king. Plus, maverick businessman Charlie Mullins, British tennis superstar Virginia Wade, unpredictable Tory MP Jerry Hayes, and the no-nonsense celebrity chef John Mountain, who's banned vegans from his restaurant. It's going to be a lively show. You won't want to miss it. I'll see you at 9.
Hello there, I am Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. The Communications Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim, joins me, as does the author, broadcaster and firefighter Paul Embry. Well, it's Friday night, so that means that Dewberry Tavern is open, so cheers, everybody. We like a new face, don't we?
Cheers.
Cheers to you
Cheers,
too.
Reem.
Cheers, everybody at home.
Oh, it's
So,
nice.
seeing as we are drinking, let's talk about drinking, shall we? Because the British Medical Association is lobbying the government to lower England and Wales drink-drive limit. Now, just to give you some context here, we currently have the highest legal limit in Europe at 80 milligrams per 100 millilitres of blood. I've got to say, if I am completely honest, if you put a gun to my head and ask me, Michelle, you must get the answer right, what exactly can you drink? I'm not sure I would know, but I cannot always gauge it as being about, I don't know, a glass of wine. But some people would then say, well, you know, how big's the glass? And therefore, that is where the ambiguity comes from, doesn't it? So some people are asking, it's about time to reduce it. So just to give you examples, Slovakia, Hungary, Czech Republic, the limit there is 0. Scotland, of course, they moved theirs down to 50 fairly recently. Where are you on this?
So I don't think that we should reduce the limit at all. I think that generally speaking, we should be trusting people to make clever decisions themselves. Of course, they don't want themselves to get into these kind of accidents. When we're looking at Scotland as that particular example, they did reduce it to 50 and they predicted that it would actually reduce the number of traffic accidents, and it didn't. So, but effectively what it did do is it had these unintended consequences on local pubs. You know, it's very easy in London, you jump on the tube if you've had a few too many to drink. But if you're in, you know, sort of these slightly more the countryside, or if you're in areas where you have to drive, these local pubs rely on those people that drive to the pub. And effectively what this regulation actually did in reducing this actually meant that a lot of those local pubs had to close down. A lot of them actually ended up losing a lot of their revenue. So this is effectively another government policy which is reducing local pub culture, and I think that's a shame.
Do you agree?
No.
I was getting a bit confused where we're going with that there. Go on.
No, I don't agree. I think that... Look, I've been a firefighter. I've been to incidents where people have had car crashes caused as a result of drink driving. It seems to me that the law is completely outdated, has not been updated since 1967. We are out of kilter with the rest of Europe. Some European countries have 0 tolerance, some have 20 milligrams, some have 50. Ours is still up at 80. I think the data shows that actually there is more chance of causing an accident.
What data?
Well, I think... Well,
the data from Scotland shows that it didn't reduce road traffic
The British Medical
accidents.
Association have produced data showing that there is, I think, a 2.27, I think it is, if I get my facts right, 27% increase on the chances of having an accident if you are driving with that particular limit, 80 mil, compared to somebody who isn't drinking. Now, against that background, and I don't think necessarily you need to be a scientist to understand that if you're driving with 80 milligrams in your blood of alcohol, then your reflexes are impaired, and actually you are not as capable as you would be if you were not driving at all with alcohol. And the logic of your argument, I think, Reem, is to say, well, OK, do you think 100 mil would be acceptable? Do you think 200 milligrams
I think we should
would be
stop. I
acceptable?
think the government at the moment, and we saw this with buy one, get one, banning buy one, get one free. The government seem to think that actually this nanny statism, where they effectively tell people what they can and cannot do, I think it's actually quite insulting. People are clever enough. Well, actually, I would argue we shouldn't have a limit at all, but I think that's not
you're telling
political.
me, you're telling me I could go for a night out now. I could go, right, me and you, let's go. We'll go to the pub right now. We'll go shots.
Get bladdered.
We'll do the tequila, and then you'll go, Michelle, you know what, I'm going to drive you home. And you think that that should be allowed?
So do you think that you would get in a car with me if I had 5 shots of vodka?
If I was pretty hammered, I might think it was a good idea, yeah.
I think you're clever enough to know that that is an
What about the
unacceptable
pedestrians
thing to
walking
do.
down the road who you're whizzing past, absolutely off your face, and driving a lethal weapon?
So again, I think we need to look at the evidence here rather than just trying to introduce more government regulation for the sake of it. We saw what happened in Scotland.
No, but we're testing your theory. You're saying that actually, in theory, you know, why have a limit at all? I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I'll never forget years and years, I'm going back years now, me and my mother, it's only by the grace of God that we're here. We were standing in the middle, you know, when you've got like a two-part road, you've got a bit in the middle, and we were stood in the bit of a middle waiting to cross, and this car came off this roundabout, it mounted the roundabout, and it honestly nearly wiped me and my mother out, and it was only, I don't even know how it did it, we managed to get out of the way, and I'm talking about it felt like millimetres, and there is no way that that guy could have been either sober or not on something. And I just think people, if you drink too much, and here's the problem, people respond to alcohol differently. So some people, if you're like a big, massive guy, you can have about, I don't know, a couple of drinks maybe and be absolutely fine. If you're like a tiny, stick-thin girl, you could have a small glass of wine and be like out of your mind.
And it gets to you very quickly. So, Michelle, I mean, that particular instance sounds horrible, but do you think that particular individual drank over the 80-milligram limit? Because if they did, then the law is entirely pointless.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, people push boundaries, don't they? So someone might think, right, I can legally have one drink, so you know what, I'll have an extra one for the road. Anyway, I'll tell you this, because look at the time flies. Apparently, 549 people were killed in the UK by drunk drivers. So I'm going to leave you to ponder that on your Friday night. Where do you stand when it comes to drink-drive limits? I've got to say, personally, I do think it is a little bit unclear, because who really knows what these 80s and 100s... who even knows what that is? Surely it should just be one drink or no drink. I don't know, you tell me, but look, time flies. Paul, Reem, thank you very much. Also, John says, I'm a very small business owner and I think your show, Michelle, is the best thing that's ever happened in the UK today. Can't believe you're only saying today. What about the last 2 years? Well, yeah, why are you saying ever in your entire lifetime? Anyway, you know what? I'll take the compliment. I appreciate it, and I appreciate all of you watching, listening. Don't go anywhere. Packed shows coming up, but I'll see you on Monday night.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A sunny and hot weekend at first for some, before the inevitable thundery breakdown and much fresher conditions arrive from the Atlantic. We've got a couple of areas of low pressure spinning out to the west of the UK. They're helping to draw up this increased heat and humidity before they send some weather fronts in, and we see this thundery breakdown later Saturday and into Sunday. But before that happens, a clear and dry night for many. We will see the cloud thicken across Wales and the southwest, and some showers will push into Devon and Cornwall by dawn. But it's a muggy night wherever you are, 17, 18, 19 Celsius fairly widely. Even in the north of Scotland, mid-teens are possible. But a fine start for Scotland and for much of England first thing Saturday. Sunny skies, temperatures shooting up, but the showers in the southwest will quickly push into central areas, developing into an intense area of thundery rain by the afternoon, with the risk of localised flooding, large hail and frequent lightning, particularly towards the Midlands into northern England and southern Scotland later. But ahead of that rain, could reach the low 30s in East Anglia. Much fresher conditions arrive by the start of Sunday, any thundery rain clearing for the north of Scotland, but further spells of wet weather likely to brush past southeast England before some heavy showers and thunderstorms develop across Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest into the afternoon. We keep the showers and some thunderstorms into the start of next week, but it also turns cooler.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.